This is Literary Concepts Lesson 6, and after a week off, we are ready to talk about archetypes. When we talk about archetypes, we need to first identify what they are. Even though it sounds like architect in a way, I suppose, an archetype refers to kind of like a stereotype in a way. So this is generic, ideal model of a person, object, or concept. In other words, what we're talking about is from one thing to the other, from one story, from one movie to the other, these types of characters, symbols, and settings usually mean the same thing. So if we kind of take that last bullet point and kind of consider that a lot of these things are cliches that we're used to. So some of the examples that we look at can be really helpful. So for example, if we look at common archetypal characters, we have the sidekick, the hero, and the damsel in distress. And in a lot of cases, Disney is really great at playing around with archetypes. If you think of nearly any Disney movie, kind of in recent history, every princess, every hero in those movies, those animated feature films, they have some sort of animal sidekick. In the movie Tangled, Rapunzel has a pet chameleon. In Frozen, Kristoff has his reindeer companion Sven. So you have these sidekicks that kind of help these characters out. Again, it's an archetype. We expect to see them, and they all kind of serve the same purpose. The same can be said for heroes. So if you read the Odyssey, you're maybe familiar with Joseph Campbell, the heroic cycle. That's an archetype. And the cool thing about that is whether it's the Odyssey or if it's Star Wars or some other story like Harry Potter, for example, you have all of these characters having a similar situation. There's some elderly sage person who kind of guides them and shows them the way, but at the same time, they leave a location to go learn more about themselves. They're tested in a heroic way, and they learn something about themselves. The same can be said for symbols, regardless of any culture in the world. More often than not, darkness kind of represents mystery and evil, whereas light can represent hope or innocence. Water, in a lot of creation myths, serves the same purpose. There's many stories that have flood stories, and those floods usually represent a cleansing. The water washes things away. Watch a movie sometime and watch how water is used to kind of cleanse the characters and to kind of renew them. Usually the character changes in some sort of way after they are subjected to rain or a bath or something. The same can be also said about setting. So a small town, everybody knows each other, so small towns usually represent intolerance. The forest, on the other hand, can represent kind of wildness. And kind of an untamed, there's kind of an untamed archetype associated with a forest. So the thing is that archetypes extend on and on and on and on and on. You can look at them, but really what it says is that regardless of the story, these things generally stay the same. Here's why this is so cool. In film and in literature, we see archetypes all the time. So if you take world lit, one of the things that you see is how different cultures, even though they celebrate different holidays, all of their heroes are generally treated the same way. Like you said in the last slide, flood, even though it's different from culture to culture, a flood serves the same purpose. It cleanses, it washes the bad away. So because we see these things so often, the more we understand about archetypes, the easier it is for us to interpret literature. We don't have to guess at what light represents, because if it means, enlightenment in one story, or kind of goodness and hope in one story, it probably means goodness, hope, and enlightenment in another story. These things don't change. And so that's how archetypes can serve to help us understand stories better. And that's why we should pay attention to what's going on with archetypes. So again, just really quick to review, an archetype is kind of a generic character, setting, symbol that we see from story to story to story that doesn't really change. It's like a really big cliche. That's archetype.